Hello, welcome to Staring Down the Storm, Autism Advocacy in America. I'm your host, Tabitha Ziegler. All right, everybody, welcome to the show. This is Mira Hall. She came all the way from Ohio today to chat with us. And yeah, I'm just going to give Mira the floor and let her talk about whatever she wants to talk about. I have a pretty strong feeling that we're going to have a lot to discuss today. So go ahead, Mira. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me. Yeah, lots to discuss. We kind of just jump in wherever. I know that we talked about
How about we take a little bit of time to get to know Mira?
Yeah.
We know you're from Ohio. Tell us a little bit about your origin story.
Yeah, so I grew up in Central Ohio, just turned 28, Monday the 21st, so it's officially tourist season. And I grew up in a very, very, very small town in Central Ohio, very, predominantly white, Christian, a lot of a monolith, if you would have, just like very much what you think the Midwest is. Not a lot of diversity, not a lot of anything out of the norm. Everyone was the same. You kind of fit in the cookie cutter mold. I branched out in high school and went and studied abroad in Japan for a year. My junior year of high school, I spent the entire year over there. Came back, finished my senior year up, and then I went to Maine for college. I went to the University of New England, and I got my bachelor's in both psychology and liberal studies with an emphasis on history, poli-sci, and philosophy. And I also got a minor in writing. Spent about another year in Maine, primarily working in behavioral health for kids. I worked both at residential facilities and as a child protective assessment social worker. I will say, not for me, not a fan. Probably one of my least favorite jobs I've ever had is working in child protective services. Moved back to Ohio right before the pandemic hit, 2 weeks before shutdown. And it wasn't even correlated with that. It was a lot to do with mental health stuff, which I'm very open about, like my mental health struggles. And moving back here really helped with taking care of those. Had taken a break from school because of all of that. Wasn't really sure of directions. Ended up going to Tiffin for my master's degree, and I got my master's in psychology. And it is a research-based master's, so I don't have any sort of clinical licensure, but I have research history, and then worked more in behavioral health. Worked in another residential facility here in Ohio, then moved on to working in a K through 12 behavioral school where everyone either has behavioral health issues or an IEP. Before finally transitioning to my current position where I'm a case manager for people living with HIV and AIDS funded through the Ryan White program.
Wow.
Which has been an absolutely incredible experience to kind of learn a lot more about that community in general, because my school growing up did not give us anything really of sustenance and substance about HIV. It was, this is really scary and only queer people can get it. And that's what we were told. And so it's very much like a fear tactic, which, so, you kind of go into that field and you're like, oh, it's a little nerve wracking. But I've learned a lot, and I love hearing stories from my clients who are long-term survivors. And as of August 18th, I will be officially starting law school at Capital University in Columbus.
Wow. Well, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. I was kind of pushed due to the recent political climate after the elections in November. Yeah. It's been something I've been considering for a really long time. Growing up, everyone said I was going to be a lawyer. I was like, no, I'm going to be an artist. Or I'm going to be a psychologist. And then I just started thinking about it more and more. And after election day turned out as it did, I was like, well, that's my sign. I need to be able to do more than I can now. And I can't from my current position within society. So I'm going to move it to something else and kind of go from there and see what I can do to help others.
Would you like to speak a little bit more in depth about exactly what was it? Because, as we both know, we come from very red states. Both grew up in the church, have really strong ties in the community with people that have a strong faith. What was it particularly for you about this administration that was, say, a huge red flag that really made that push? Because that is a significant push. I mean, all the money it takes to go back to a grad school. Sometimes people have to move, but to make such a strong and steadfast decision with one action, there's a long history behind that, I would imagine.
Oh, very much so. So I grew up in a very religious environment. If anyone's seen National Treasure, you've heard of the Freemasons. They're a real group. They have several offshoots of it, depending on your sex, gender, and age. One of which is called the International Order of Rainbow for Girls. And it is young women ages 12 through 21. Okay. And they have pledged girls from 8 to 12, which puts a lot of emphasis on purity culture and being good and subservient. We had a very strict dress code.
Okay.
We had different rituals we had to perform. I was initiated at Grand Assembly as a 12-year-old. It was in front of the whole state. So it was a big deal, but it talked a lot about shame, and it caused me to have a lot of shame around my queer identity for a really long time. And I also put a lot back onto the town that I grew up in, and feeling like, everyone else could be a certain way, but I could not. And it wasn't until I was far away from that town that I kind of was allowed to explore my own identity and explore a little more outside of the confines of just this small town ideology. Studying abroad also was really helpful in that, and I wasn't exposed to just one mindset anymore. I was exposed to an entirely different culture, an entirely different side of the world. And everyone else that I met that was also there for an exchange also brought a bunch of different mindsets and opinions and worldviews. And I couldn't sit by with the current administration wanting to take away rights of not only members of my community, but members of other marginalized communities that, though I might not be a member of, that does not mean that I can stand idly by while their rights are getting taken away from them. So I decided I needed to do something. And though it's going to put me in debt, and though it's going to cost me a lot of money and a lot of time, I know that it's for the greater good. So
let's elaborate on that. I think there's a lot more there. So obviously, this podcast is largely about autism and the neurodiverse community. So how do you tie in with this community as well?
Yeah, so I am actually what's known as ADHD. I have both ADHD and autism.
Okay.
I was diagnosed officially 2 years ago, roughly 2 years ago. So I finally went through the process of getting diagnostic testing done, which is not something everyone needs to have done. I am very much in the camp of self-diagnosis is valid when it comes to things like autism.
Okay.
Especially with, some things being talked about of like how to fix autistic people and stop and prevent it. And I'm like, we don't need to put it on paper. If you don't have the diagnosis already, we don't have to get it. That's fine. I had gotten it done because I wanted to be able to understand myself a little bit more and realize, like, is this something medical related, or is this my autism or my ADHD? And obviously you do need a diagnosis of ADHD in order to get any sort of medication assistance with that. But that's how I kind of got the ball rolling with that, was they were trying to get me medicated for ADHD. And the person doing my testing was like, have you considered autism testing? And I was like, I get told a lot that I probably should be tested. And he was like, yeah, we can do that too. And I scored really high, which is pretty normal because I'm really good at taking tests. But, that just means that I have a high autism score, which is also fine. I don't like using terms like high functioning or low functioning. And I also I don't use terms like Asperger's or anything like that, because those are very outdated. And, they come from some negative people from 1940s Germany. But I am much more of a high max being autistic female. So I can kind of blend a little bit easier. I don't have quite as many challenges as other people who have autism, but I do have my own set of challenges that I have to face and work through. A lot of them are predominantly social or executive function based. But, you know, there are people who struggle a bit more and need more assistance. I was raised a bit in a particular way where I didn't have a lot of like aid in like school or anything growing up. I was the aid, so I was the one helping. So it got to the point very early on in life that I kind of had to learn how to manage these outbursts and these meltdowns and these overwhelming feelings like internally, because externally I was supposed to be the one helping everyone.
That's really interesting. So as we've spoken, and very few people know this, but I suppose I'm just going to out myself. So I'm like double outing myself because I'm also part of the LGBTQ plus community. And whenever I came out, I would consider myself an old gay, because whenever I was out and figuring things out, there was a lesbian, gay, bisexual, and drag queens and drag kings. I didn't hear a lot of trans even at that point. It doesn't mean that it didn't exist.
Yeah.
Just saying, of the vernacular that was used at that time and the bars and whatnot, it wasn't something that I heard a lot. So I'm getting ready to be 42, and I'm also a Taurus, so I find that really interesting because we're both Tauruses, and it would seem both feisty as well. I'm coming from a different generation in the gay world, if you will. I hadn't even heard the word queer until I was older. Yeah, to be completely honest with you, I didn't even understand it. It was like, what is this? What does this mean? Like, so I can understand where the general public would, you know, with pronouns and whatnot, be like, what is this? How does this apply? Does it matter? Like, what's important about this? Are you just looking for, you know, something?
A label.
Yeah, are you just looking for something different? You know, like, what's so special about you, or what does it matter? Would you like to speak about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the different generation thing is big. When I was first explaining to my mom why I used the label of queer rather than something like pansexual, because I had originally come out as bisexual in college. Because even back in 2016, when I first came out, there were still a really limited, you know, number of labels of what people were. And there was a really big confusion of the differences between like pansexuality versus bisexuality and like the nuances there. And I had come out as bisexual because I was like, I like everyone. Like I like men, I like women, I like non-binary people, but I hadn't really fully understood what pansexual was. So I came out as bi, more like in-depth exploring of my sexuality and the understanding what bisexual truly means. I was like, well, it does mean my gender and at least one other gender. But then I started having, you know, the gender identity crisis of like, I'm a woman, but sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I'm just a person and I don't have a gender, and gender's weird, and gender doesn't make sense in black and white because gender's not black and white. So my brain gets confused. So then I kind of opted more towards using gender queer as a gender identifier and queer in general as a sexuality identifier, because it just makes more sense. It's hard to put a specific label on it, and because of that, it's easier to use a more broad term. But when I first told my mom that, because she knew I was like bisexual, she knew all this, she thought I was calling myself a slur. Because when she was growing up, calling someone queer, they used it as a slur. They used it in a derogatory manner. They were saying you are and like used it to in the same way they would use like the F slur.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Of my generation, I would definitely say that was also my impression. So the first time I heard it, I did have that reaction, like using the N-word, and I was like, whoa, hold on a second. Like, what's that about? And I was a little confused by that. So I found that interesting that, you know, was it always that way? Like, were people just not understanding? Or do you think it's maybe like, you know, it's like a revision? Or
I think
like,
it's a reclamation.
Yeah.
Because there was a period in time where it was a slur and it was derogatory and no one used it as an identity. And I think a lot of it comes from the like millennials, and then it's gone down to my generation of Gen Z, like the older Gen Z. We're big into reclamation of words. And so similarly to like how with fellow women, like we'll call each other the B word, like we're reclaiming that word. We're not using it in a derogatory manner. Queer has has always been an identity and has always been an identity marker. But because people use it in such a derogatory way, no one is ever going to claim that as their identity. Whereas people in the LGBTQ community now, we are reclaiming that term. We are saying, no, I am queer. That is who I am. And like, that is my word to use to describe myself. And so it is very much like a reclamation of like taking the power away from that negative word and putting a more positive light on it.
Interesting. You know, I think there are other people too that are just, they're really terrified. And I've heard this a few times now, parents, for example, of young children, that they have heard some things, and I'm assuming read some studies about a correlation between people that have autism and other identities. That seems to terrify people. It doesn't terrify me. See, I have he's not old, but he's my older child. And from a very young age, there just seemed a little bit about him that was not fitting the boxes that would be the gender markers. I am one that feels like, you know, let kids be kids, let them play, let them do their thing. How are they going to know what they like if you don't let them experiment? So from a baby, I could just tell. I'm not quite sure what it will look like in the future, obviously. But now that I have 3 children, as they grow, they all are starting to get really different personalities. Like his sister, she hates clothes that are touching herself. You know, she's like in the looser clothing. So some of the other clothes that my mom would buy her, for example, she's like, eh. And I'm not quite sure if it's always because, that sort of looks like girls' clothes and I'm not crazy about that, or the color, or if it's primarily like fabric. Kai doesn't seem to matter. Like he's that kid that most people would see as your stereotypical girly girl. So he will always go for the dress-up dresses. I bet we have 10 of the different princess dresses. So I just line them up and he tells me which one he wants to wear. Sometimes he wears them to school and I'm like, you do you, man. Very rarely does his sister ever want to wear them. She may at some point. There are probably people out there that are a little bit more open-minded that may just chalk that up to theater kids. And I kind of lead with that sometimes. I'm like, he's probably going to be a theater kid. But essentially what I'm saying is that's just a soft way for me to say that I think there's something else going on here. That may not be anything down the road, but I'm acknowledging of the boxes that we are supposed to fall into, I can already tell that my son is not fitting that box. So how can you speak about this in relation to you, since, you know, you're of a younger generation, you're seeing more of these things, you're running into more of these people that are in, you know, the autistic ADHD communities that are also in another community. What do you think about these things and, you know, the prevalence of people with autism also being part of another gender? And how do you think that is different from, say, the normal society?
So not only do I have like my own personal experience with that, I've worked with kids for, I think, my first 7 years in the workforce. I was working with kids. I was either tutoring or I was working in behavioral health fields where I was just like with the kids nonstop. And I've worked with all age ranges. So I've worked from like 6-year-olds all the way up to 18-year-olds. So I've seen a lot through like the developmental stages. And I will say that my neurodiverse kiddos are ones who I see typically be the most understanding of people who are going through like identity struggles, even if they aren't themselves, because they just kind of know, they're like, like something is not normal. It's not the societal norm within myself. So like I can empathize with the fact that something is going on with you. Personally, I struggled very heavily with my own gender identity. Since I was really little, I struggled with the societal ideals of femininity and what a woman is supposed to look like and how girls are supposed to present. And it didn't always feel right. There was something in my brain where sometimes I can feel very feminine and very much like a woman and like a girl. And that was something I could lean into. There were other times where I didn't feel like that at all. And it was very much, I don't feel attached to a gender marker, a gender like structure. I don't want to look like a man. I don't want to look like a woman. I don't want to be one or the other. I want to be nothing. I'm just a person. And that was something I really had an issue in my own brain trying to come to terms with. And there are some studies out currently that do show that neurodiverse people, especially people with autism, do have a tendency to use gender identity markers such as non-binary, genderqueer, gender fluid, agender, because people as a society try to make gender as a black and white, which is very interesting because we have a gender called non-binary, which is there's not one or the other. It's not man or woman. There's not two boxes. There's an entire spectrum of gender. And trying to say that there's only black or white doesn't work. And it's one of the few times where being autistic, normally we think in just black and white. That doesn't work here because there's no actual true one or the other. Everything is gray, which means like I also am gray. I do know for a fact I'm not a man. I've done male drag before and opposite of gender euphoria. I was like, nope, very certain, not me. Yeah, I don't like it. And so I was able to confirm that way, like, yep, definitely no he, him pronouns. But I use she and they pronouns very interchangeably. And there will be some times where there'll be days where I'll be like, hey, I'm feeling much more like not gendered today. And I'll tell my friends and they respect that. My coworkers respect it. And we'll just use they pronouns. And it's really nice that I found a community that can respect that and does and encourages that growth and that exploration. If I would have stayed in the town that I grew up in, I would have never come out as queer or I've explored my gender identity at all, because it was something that was frowned upon. And also like people were bullied horrendously in the town I grew up in for any sort of differences. We had one girl come out as bisexual and she was bullied so badly that she threatened to do some things to people at the school our senior year. And it's like they didn't take any accountability for that of like why, like how that person got pushed to that. And it was because they bullied her for being gay. And so there's a huge correlation between the people who are autistic and people who are experiencing this, but not everyone who experiences one experiences the other. And I love that you're letting your son wear the dresses. Like, even if it like turns out he just likes to wear dresses. That's what a lot of people don't realize is that's gender affirming care. So that's the first step, like the first couple of steps. If a kid comes to you and they're like, hey, I don't want, if I had a daughter and she had long hair, and she's like, no, I want short hair. Like, I don't want hair. She's like, because I feel like a boy. And I'm like, oh, okay. Cut the hair, get them clothes that they feel comfortable in. We should be making our kids comfortable. We shouldn't be forcing them into situations that make them uncomfortable. If a child doesn't want to wear jeans because they don't like the texture of them, we don't force them to wear jeans. So why should we force someone to wear a skirt if they're not comfortable in skirts and they don't feel like it's something they should be wearing? Haircuts are the same way. If a kid wants to use different pronouns, they're kids, they're exploring. If you want to let kids be kids, let them be kids. Everyone has imaginative play and everyone is exploring who they are as a child. That's a huge thing that I think people forget is we have different stages of development. And especially within the elementary school age range, that is when kids are discovering who they are. They are trying on different identities to see what fits them. And they're going to be influenced by their friends, what they see on TV, yes. But that's not what's going to stick. What's going to stick is what feels right. When the puzzle piece clicks, it clicks, everything falls together. And so that's a huge thing of like, I have nieces, I don't have kids of my own, that I try really hard to like support them in. If my niece likes dinosaurs, I get her dinosaur things. Dinosaurs might be more traditionally like masculine for little boys, and I'm like, oh no, like she wants a dump truck with a dinosaur on it. I'm gonna get her that. I'm not gonna get her astronaut Barbie because it's a Barbie. Like, I very much try to not play into those like gender roles of just like, oh no, you can go play in like the cooking set. We're going to play in the mud outside. I don't try to follow with that. I'm like, whatever the kid wants to do, we're going to encourage because it enhances their growth and like who they are.
I think that feeds into a larger issue that is resurfacing that I think is very dangerous. If we don't encourage empathy in our men and our boys that become men, how can we instill the value for the other sexes, whatever that looks like?
Yeah.
But especially, the female sex, for example. If we treat these boys in a way that is volatile, and that is a very early introduction, especially as a female. As an example, let's use my son, right? If I were to, because he also has long hair and he wears braids and the whole bit. If I were to hold Kai down and say, you're not wearing that dress, I'm putting these clothes on you whether you like it or not, I'm cutting your hair, what that does to the inside of a person and how that festers long term, I don't think that's a good thing. I think that the men in our society that have been raised by strong women and see women as valuable and equal, they are truly the leaders in our society.
Oh, yeah.
I don't agree, which I have 2 sons and a daughter. I might be a little older and behind on the terms, which is why I'm asking you about these things, because I think it's important. These are the type of conversations that I'm hearing of my generation and older generations. Like, I completely will be honest with you. I'm not even certain that I completely understand they either. But I'm going more with leading with vulnerability and saying, hey, I don't really get this, and trying to seek out the answers and say, hey, which I'd like you to talk a little bit more about they. Like,
which is what we want.
People don't know.
They don't. And actually, I have written a children's book that I'm trying to get published out there that I've written from the perspective of a non-binary third grader, because I think it also kind of helps shine up the light on how it's used in like conversation. I know a lot of people are like, they is plural, they is plural. Yes. They's also been used in the singular since back in Shakespeare's writing. When you don't know someone's gender, when you're speaking or writing, we naturally use the word they. So if I pick a gender neutral name, like the name Alex, if I'm like, oh, like Alex got up this morning and went downstairs to eat breakfast, they poured a bowl of cereal, you would automatically start using the word they, because you don't know yet how to identify the person. It's become more of an issue as a society where people are like, being like, I use they, them pronouns. That people are like, wait. Well, now I know you appear to be this. You appear to be a woman or a man. So now I'm confused because now they is plural. And it is a very complicated thing. And there are some people who get very offended every time a question is asked about it. I am of the viewpoint of, if you come with like sincerity and like truly wanting to know, and it's just, you're like, I don't know this, like I haven't learned this. My current partner asked me the same thing. He was like, can you explain they to me? And I was like, absolutely. No one should be getting offended with that, because you're actively trying to learn. It's when people intentionally go out of their way to like misgender in the means of harm, being malicious, that starts becoming more of an issue, where it's like, that this is a trans woman, that she uses she, her pronouns, and people go up and intentionally call her him and he and man, because they're trying to evoke a response. So yeah, they is very, it can be confusing, especially in certain sentences. It's like, it doesn't quite make sense to use a plural sounding pronoun. But it is something we naturally use. And if you don't think about it, you do slip into using they as a singular pronoun. And a lot of people also forget that pronouns include things like I, me, my, when we get into the whole pronoun discussion, because they're like, we shouldn't be teaching pronouns, we shouldn't be respecting pronouns. we use pronouns in almost every single sentence we ever say.
I think that's really interesting because I consider myself a fairly learned person. You know, I like to read. I read a lot. The way that you just explained that made perfect sense to me. I was like, you're right. You know, that makes perfect sense in a sentence. So to use that as an example of they, I was like, oh, okay, I get it. Now, tomorrow, if someone used a different sentence, maybe I might have to pause and be like, right, I'm not quite sure that I understand, but I agree with what you're saying. You know, if you're curious, ask.
Yes.
And, you know, this is also another reason why I don't necessarily lead with me being, I think I would feel comfortable identifying solely as a lesbian.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be insulted if someone calls me gay or whatever. But I also don't necessarily lead with it because there isn't anything necessarily about me when I go out in public that screams gay. So I use that to my advantage.
Yep.
I let people get to know me first. And then eventually when it comes out, you know, people normally make their assessment of someone in the first, 5 to 7 seconds of talking with you.
Yeah.
So if when they start to speak to me and they already like me as a person, and then later on down the road, they find out that I'm gay, it's harder to hate me then. So I think that
Because you're a person to them.
Right.
You're not a concept. You're not a scary thought.
Right. So for other people that, you know, like you're saying, how they dress, that has to be really hard because, you know, to be able to be yourself, especially the trans community, right? Like, I am not part of the trans community, but I have friends that are, and man, are they struggling and they're terrified right now.
One of my coworkers is leaving for Thailand, packing everything up, packing up their life, and leaving the country. I have friends who are planning on leaving the country as well, because they don't feel safe.
Yeah.
And it's more than just leaving Ohio. It's more than just leaving a red state. They don't feel safe in the country as a whole because the country as a whole voted.
Yeah.
And this is what we're now having to deal with. They're losing access to basic human rights, like being able to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
I am convinced that specifically cis men who are trying to make a lot of bills about preventing only trans women from going into the restroom that corresponds with their actual gender identity, I'm convinced they think it's just like an open trow in the women's bathroom and everyone's just like squatting together because it stalls. There are doors. I have never seen another woman's like genitalia in the bathroom because we're not going like under the stall to like peek and like see what's going on. That's not happening. So I can only imagine that just the men who think that that's what's happening think we're just like all in a trial together like they are at like a sporting event where it's just like a big thing. That's not what's going on.
Yeah, I'd like to touch on something here because it's something that really irritates me. I'm just going to say what I have to say and then you know, run with it. I have never been afraid of trans people. I have never felt threatened by trans people. To my knowledge, I've not been aggressed in any way by a trans person. And to be completely honest with you, I would 100% feel safe with these people. Like, as a female, when you're talking about fear, like, because there's a lot that goes into being afraid that, you know, we also should not experience in a free society.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, true equality is not walking with your teeth between your fingers just in case, right? But that's kind of the life that we live and have lived for a long time.
I grew up being taught that.
Right. That's a little sidebar of an issue. But that rolls into my bigger point. As a lesbian, I'm not a man-hater. I've got plenty of friends that are straight men, Republican, that I would drink a beer with or a shot with or whatever, that, heck, I'd probably be comfortable sleeping in the same bed because that has nothing to do with sexuality for me personally. That being said, of the group that I have felt most aggressed by in general throughout my life, it has been straight men.
Yes.
Straight white men. And I'm not picking on them, not picking on you guys out there, but I think it's important to say that because if you're at the top of the mountain as it is, What are you afraid of? I mean, what is it? What do you think these people are testing your manhood about? Like, do you need to get in a fist fight with a trans person to feel manly? Like, these people are not trying to go into a bathroom stall with your daughter. Like, that is not happening. And to be honest with you, if we're going to pick on people that you should keep your children away from, let's talk about the clergy, for example. And also not picking on them either. But we have to recognize as a society our downfalls. And, I'm going to bring up another point here. I've got a little list here. I'm going to start beating my drum a bit. Since we're talking about the clergy, and I do think there are people that do a really good job. There are a lot of different clergy members that do a great job. I can't imagine what it must be like for them when they are doing a good job, and then they have people that are molesting kids, raping kids. So let's talk about a movie called Sugarcane, for example. It is a film highlighting traumas inflicted on Indigenous children. So in this country and in Canada, there are a lot of bad things going on with the Indigenous community for long periods of time. They're forcibly removed from their families and put into these schools. Many of them died. Many of them were molested and raped. And this movie highlights a little bit about that. If we want to talk about, brown people in this country, who belongs and who doesn't, it doesn't get any more American than the Indigenous community. They were here before everybody. So why aren't we concerned? Why aren't these straight men who are at the top of the tier? If you want to take up your flag for something that is anti-American, who's sticking up for these Indigenous kids, for these Indigenous women? It doesn't just have to be the girls. Hey, if you feel that, over the past few years that, the women are getting too much press, maybe deep down within you, there's something inside you that just hates that. All right. At least advocate for the Indigenous boys then. Come on, pick something. I mean, we have a movement right now called MMIW, Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. And it's, I don't know if you've seen it, but
The red handprint.
Right.
The mouth.
Red handprint. These women and girls are disappearing en masse from anywhere around these reservation areas. They're just disappearing. Nobody finds them again. Between these Indian schools that they're still digging up bones, that these people are still having to deal with the trauma of that. Babies that these clergymen were indoctrinating, and let's just say it for what it is, raping them, because a kid can't consent.
No.
They can't. And most of these people didn't even know what was going on to them. And furthermore, these people are representatives of God. How dare they question their authority? What a horrible misuse of power. Why aren't people having these conversations? You want to pick on the trans community and the brown people or whatever? If you need something that you feel is going on in your communities that is wrong, maybe go volunteer at a women's shelter, because most of the women, irregardless of color, doesn't matter the background. If there is something going on that is abusive, most of the time it's the women and the children having to vacate the property. They're the ones having to leave.
Man doesn't have to leave.
Right. And like I said, I'm not picking on the guys. I'm just saying, if you're a good man out there, which I know good men, there are plenty of good, straight, white, Republican men that I know that are good individuals. And, to thump my drum a little more, I don't have any respect for guys that aren't willing to change a diaper.
Oh, yeah, no.
Just saying, come on, guys. The guys that I grew up around in a farming community, that, very rural, most people farmed, a lot of people participated in church. We probably got more churches than we do anything else in my tiny town. I'm not saying nothing bad never happened there. I'm just saying, of the people that were leading through example and that were in leadership positions, these are not the same white Republican men that are abusing children. So be careful who you take a stand with if you're not that. I know I beat my drum a lot there.
No, it's okay.
I was like, beat, beat, beat. But, I will let you take the floor now. I just thought it was important to just mention some of these things because we are entering into dangerous territory here.
We very much are. Like, wanting to talk about protecting the kids. They're all about protect the children, protect the children. Ohio passed House Bill 68, I believe it's House Bill 68 or 86. We banned gender-affirming care for children in the state of Ohio. But it does more than just that. I spoke out against this bill at the State House. I testified against it when it was still just a House bill, trying to explain that gender-affirming care is not, they kept saying mutilation. That's not what it is, especially for children. It starts with using their preferred name and pronouns and maybe changing clothes and hair. Puberty blockers and or hormone replacement therapy at the appropriate stages of development. Surgeries don't happen until you are over the age of 18, unless there is some sort of serious medical consideration happening. We give cisgender boys top surgery all the time that have gynecomastia, which is when the pectoral tissue of a male grows, so they develop breasts. So they have top surgery.
Interesting.
But they're cisgender, so it's fine.
Can you repeat that again? Just
gynecomastia.
Gynecomastia.
Okay. So it's when boys develop breasts, and they can have surgery anytime to have that corrected.
Interesting.
Young women who overly develop can have a breast reduction.
There, yeah.
Breast reduction is gender affirming care. Having a hysterectomy is gender affirming care. All of that is gender affirming care, but we don't do most of that until we're over the age of 18. Ohio has banned all of it for children. They've also passed a bill that now requires teachers to use the child's given name and pronouns, even if they are trans. They now must use their name on their birth certificate.
Okay.
If their parents don't know and the child is requesting, the teachers are now required to out the child, which can put children in a lot of risk and a lot of harm. Not allowing them to access gender affirming care also, because it's primarily therapy based, puts them at more risk for suicidal ideation and attempts, self-harm.
I was just going to ask you about that.
They're defunding the LGBTQ crisis hotlines in Ohio. The House bill that was passed also specifically bans trans girls from competing in women's sports in the K through 12 and collegiate level in Ohio. Okay. Not trans men, not trans boys. They can still compete in men's sports. Trans women cannot compete. So it is targeted at trans women. It also granted protections for doctors who perform corrective surgery on infants who are born intersex.
Yeah.
So that is actual mutilation when they are making decisions without the parent or the child who's an infant's consent. And now has protections in place for doctors who elect to do that and basically decide what the child is going to be physically.
Well, let's highlight that too while we're talking about it, because a lot of people don't understand intersex. I didn't either. Yeah. I researched it. I'm no expert, by the way, but I was curious and I wanted to know. There are people out there that are our age that these types of surgeries were done to, and then by the time they wanted to have children, they weren't aware of how their body worked internally, because that's a different thing altogether. So they actually ended up sterilizing these people by removing some of their parts, so then they couldn't even have children. So let's say, I know some more PT-13 plus here, but if you have gonads or what have you, and then they remove them, right? Then they're sterilizing you.
Yeah.
And if we are so much for freedom, why are the parents at least being asked? I mean, these doctors aren't God. And if you believe in God, then these children were not born a mistake, because you can't have it both ways. And like I said, I
can't cherry pick.
I have firm faith. I left the church a long time ago because of me being part of the gay community, and it wasn't accepted. That doesn't mean that I lost my faith. It just means that I wasn't accepted in those places. I recently just started participating in the church that I went to as a child, because they have the infant room that has all the toys and everything, and they've been really great with my kids, and they love going there. I have to say, I'm really impressed by the preacher. Who knows what that may look like in the future?
Yeah.
And people have to do what they feel is right. I'm not saying that if a preacher feels strongly that, hey, we don't believe in this, that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to say that you shouldn't have the right to do that. I firmly believe in free speech. However, that doesn't mean that you're a bad person if you're part of that community. It's almost like, how free is it if you were born an American citizen on American soil? Just think about this for a second. Everybody's having something to say about, birthright citizenship, but as an example, my family has been here on most sides since Indiana was Indian territory. I have most of my family members that were participating in a variety of the different conflicts that we have. I could trace my ancestry back to the Revolutionary War. I say that to say, it's not ironic that someone like me with such a background would feel so strongly about these things, because you can have your faith and you can have your patriotism and you can have your country. Those people that want to infringe on the rights of others are stomping on the backs of those that set up this country. You are allowed in this country to have free speech because of the people that died to protect it, because of the founding fathers that told Britain where to shove it, essentially, because they were tired of them. These are American values. How now, in this time, are we doing things to other people that are so restrictive that people that were born in this country that are now trans identify in a different way than how they, their gender identity at birth.
Assigned at birth, yes.
Right. Does that make them less American? I don't think so. Quite frankly, I don't care what you look like. The founding fathers, when they wrote the Declaration, when they wrote the Declaration of Independence,
were wearing wigs and heels.
Come on. It's like, you want to talk about what's American? I mean, Joe Rogan even now with deporting people is like, hey, let's hold the phone for a second, man. You can't have it all. You can't be like, oh, hey, let's just not even question it and not have, freedom of speech and, stomp all over, First Amendment rights and all that stuff. They could easily do it to us. If the Republican Party is supposed to primarily, in the past, this is how I understood it. And like I said, I'm not bashing the Republican Party. I think there's a place for everyone. But I think more importantly, as an American in this country, the things that we are supposed to hold dear, the freedoms that we are supposed to hold dear, what we're supposed to stand for throughout the world since our inception is not this stuff. It is not taking American tax dollars that we work hard for and sending it to El Salvador, to a concentration camp where people go to for an indefinite amount of time, where they do not have access to lawyers or to their families. And now there are conversations being had about sending the worst of American citizens.
The home girl, and who decides that?
In what universe did the founding fathers say, that sounds like a good idea? They had prison ships in our harbor where they were putting the patriots who were fighting the British, right? All you guys have to do is open up a history book. Let's just get more patriotic. And I'm telling you, now's the time for it.
Can we just start dumping Teslas into the sea?
Tesla Tea Party? I mean, man, okay, I'm thumping all over the place. So, part of my second coming out, I also recently got diagnosed with autism. I've got 3 little kids that have autism. I was diagnosed at 41, also high masking. I do so much work for the children in the community because that's where my knowledge base is. I don't know a lot of adults that have autism or ADHD. I want to discover more. I want to learn more about myself. But I saw things in my children that as I was going down this path, trying to figure things out for my kids, grasping at resources, like as I went along the journey, I was like, I'm pretty sure I did that as a kid. Like, I'm not quite sure. Maybe they got that from me. So anyways, that's why I ended up getting tested, because I was trying to help my kids. And that's why I'm doing all this stuff. I'm trying to help my kids because I feel like that's the right thing to do. Like, we are the caretakers of the earth, of these things for our children, right? So if we don't do that, if we don't at least give them the opportunity to make mistakes, figure things out. This isn't Nazi Germany, people. This is the United States of America. The United States of America is supposed to stand for something. And I never thought that it was trampling on the freedoms of everyone else. And from what I remember from my deeply Republican family members, freedom, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, the Star-Spangled Banner, right? Land of the free, home of the brave. Did we forget these things? I had to, when I was a college student at Indiana State University, I had to listen to the religious zealots come through and spread their hellfire. I didn't tell them, oh, hey, man, like, I might not have agreed with them. And actually, a lot of it was quite hurtful. But it's like, where's the line? Like, until you get to the point where you're hurting people, which sometimes speech is hurting people, right? I'm not a legislator, but I'm just saying, we are entering into so many bits of dangerous territory. It's like, where's the freedom? We can argue all day long about all these different things, but how easy will it be once these statutes are set that they're violating all these different people's human rights? They're violating all these Americans' human rights. You don't think they're going to come for you too? That's how this works.
What's the poem is First They Came for, it's regarding...
Yeah, the Unionists.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, it's literally a poem about how Nazi Germany was able to come for people. It is a process. It's a step-by-step guide. Yeah. They're going to come after the most marginalized group of people first, which is why they started with trans people and immigrants. Because people are like, well, it's like 3% of the population, or 0.03% of the population are trans. So it's a very small amount of people, so we'll go for them first. Mm. And then people are like, oh, we can, demonize and make monsters out of people who are here undocumented and make them like this enemy. Well, then once they're all gone, who do we move to next? Oh, queer people in general. They're the outliers. Who do you go to after queer people? People of color. Who do you go after once it's just white people left? The women.
Let's not skip the autism community.
Oh, any disabled people would have gone way before then. We likely between people of color and LGBTQ, or people of color and women in general, the disabled community is also being hauled out of here. As someone who is not just autistic, ADHD, I have chronic illness as well. I have a couple of different chronic illnesses that I have to handle daily. If they access my medical record and they're like, oh, all the chronically ill people gotta go, I would have been in El Salvador. They would have been like, see you. You can't be here anymore. Why is that? Why are you allowed to decide that I'm allowed to be a person? I didn't realize that was in the Constitution, where they were like, hey, we can just decide you're no longer a person anytime. I don't remember that in any of the 27 amendments.
Me neither. Just the right for people to exist. That's what we're talking about here.
We don't want anything special. No one wants anything special. We would like to be able to live
peacefully.
Healthcare, I think, should be a human right. I shouldn't have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to not be dead.
Fair.
I shouldn't have to do that.
Well, and kids, we shouldn't be limiting education either.
No.
especially for autistic children. I mean, that's something that's going on recently. Why are we having these types of conversations? Like the most vulnerable among us, it's too expensive. Like, so now we're stepping into eugenics. You want to talk about eugenics a little bit?
Oh, yeah, eugenics. That is essentially, if anyone's been listening to the director of the national, like all of the federal health stuff, RFK Jr. with his brainworm. So why are we listening to me with the brainworm in charge of the health department? Okay. He said a lot of things recently about autistic people. We ruin families. We're never going to pay taxes and hold down jobs. I have 2 jobs. I pay a lot of taxes.
And how long have you been working?
Oh, gosh. Over a decade at this point.
Well, I'm asking that on purpose because, see, a lot of people from states like this, I think the law is still in Indiana. You can work by the time you're 14. So if you're a farm kid, you were working. Mm-hmm. So I think
I wasn't allowed to work until I was like 18 because my parents were like, you have too many other things going on.
That's fair. That's
so
solid.
I had applied for jobs. I was just not allowed to do them because my parents were like, you have 7 clubs you're doing. You can't also work. And I was like, okay.
Well, I think I'm of that generation where there was a push to do it. It's like, hey, if you're old enough to work and if you want to make your own money, this is a good way to start to show you how to be a productive member of society. So I did all that. I'm saying that on purpose to say, I found out I had autism at 41. So up until that point, if people are not worth serving, right? Like people like my kids. That's the reason I'm outing myself right now, to give you guys more examples. I'm not saying I know everything about being autism as an adult, because I certainly do not. And I've not even had the opportunity to be around a lot more autistic people. Like, she's probably the first one that I've actually been around and we're having these types of conversations.
Yeah.
But it's like, there are those of us that didn't find out until very recently.
I found out at 25.
Yeah,
26.
I went to 4 years of undergraduate school, got my bachelor's degree in languages, literatures, and linguistics, concentration in French, certificate in teaching English as a second language. Worked as a flight attendant for 17 years, was a language translator, started a nonprofit, started a travel company, doing a podcast, single mom of 3 kids with autism, like stay up late, filling out forms, jumping through all these hoops. Like, I started grad school, didn't end up finishing. I might go back, you never know. But I'm just saying, I've been paying taxes since I was 14 years old. And now we have to talk about maybe my kids won't have access to things. What do you mean? Like, my family's a perfect example of what it means to be American. Like, hardworking, been here for a long period of time. So now all of a sudden, these people that come in like Elon, which we're going to cover a lot more about that. I'm not going to say that he's barely a citizen. He's been a citizen. However, that being said, there's a real push to assimilate, and there always has been. How do we let someone like that come in and speak about American ideals whenever they're not actively practicing it? Like, what is it about Elon Musk that screams American patriotism to you?
I think it's money. That's what's screaming it to them.
Well, I think it's an interesting concept. Mm-hmm. There is this real push lately for, those of us that have extreme wealth, that there's supposed to be respect there. And I do understand that. I don't adhere to it, but I think the root of what it meant to be an American, or at least what I was told, is service to your country.
Standing up for the little guy.
Standing up for the little guy. Not turning away. When you see something going on in front of you that you know is wrong, maybe like it does violate or it pushes up against your religious beliefs or your political beliefs or affiliations. But that's not what it means to be an American. What it means to be American is like, we don't stand for that stuff in this country. That's what I think. And so to appeal to those that have some humanity left, speak up, do something. Like, if you really love this country and if you feel you have patriotism, I'm not here to tell you what your patriotism should be. I'm just telling you, all of us know if you see something in front of you that you know is wrong and you say nothing, complacency is complicity, and you are equally complicit. And that is not an American value.
I find it, I've said it for a while now, that I find it so interesting that when we would be in our history classes in like high school and teachers would be like, oh, what do you think you would do if you were in 1940s Germany and you saw the starts of the Holocaust happening? Like, what would you do? And it's the same people who stood there and said that they would have stood up and fought and they would never fall for the propaganda. They're the same ones currently perpetuating it. The playbook is the same. We're step by step going through the same playbook as they did in 1940 Germany. And I don't know how people still are refusing to see it. And it's the ones who claimed that they would have stood and fought and they would have rather have died fighting for their country and for what it meant to actually be able to be free than to join and be complacent and follow along.
Speaking of being free, like I said, I'm freaking all day long.
Yeah.
Hitting it. How do you have people like Sparts, who's Ukrainian, has strong opinions about, lady, where is your patriotism? These are your people. Like, Americans, historically, we were the ones that maybe we came in late, right? We did come in very late.
A little bit.
But that generation that had to live through that, had to fight those wars, they are all turning in their graves right now. Like, my grandfather, the only reason my family is here, to be completely honest with you, is because he was a Marine, he was based in Camp Pendleton, and he found out that he had a very rare blood type. So they told him, we're not going to send you to Korea because you'd die. Like, we wouldn't be able to get the blood. That's why my family is here. Because they kept him there and they didn't send him to Korea. And if I remember correctly, because this man, he's my favorite person in the whole world. He spoke about his brothers until he died. He used to tell us so many stories about them. And every single time he'd tell those stories, he would tear up. And I don't know for sure how many of them died or if all of them died, but I think about stories like that and stories of strength and what it means to be a good human. And I'm like, first off, how are you going to let someone else from another country come into your country and be like, hey, we have beef with this other country. And you guys seem like you'd be good friends. We kind of like you. You kind of like us. Let's join forces against this smaller nation. The whole point of us entering NATO was that stuff. While these people are showing their patriotism and fighting for their country, we're letting them die. Everybody has a different opinion about these things. I'm just saying, as far as American ideals, I'm not saying that we have to rush into every conflict. Conflicts are horrible. There's all kinds of nasty things that comes with it. No one really wins. But you are going to let these people who have been fighting for years, you're going to let them hang? You're just going to leave them there? We're not going to do anything? Forget about you people? And knowing all the atrocities going on there, the rapes, the kidnapping of children. Thousands of Ukrainian kids are in Russia right now that were stolen from their families. Is that what America stands for? I'm seeing these different things around the world. And maybe I'm older and maybe
talk about the Palestinian genocide.
Oh, Lord.
We have, every country in the world has stood idly by since it started 75 years ago. But because they finally decided to stand up in a more, media, broader spectrum, I don't know how to use the word that in between, but, more people saw the October, 8th, 7th attack in Tel Aviv, 2 years ago, a year ago. So now it's suddenly an issue. Now it's, oh my gosh, oh, look what the Palestinians are doing to Israel. No, look what they are killing children. They're targeting schools, hospitals. They are systematically, ethnically cleansing that land. And our current administration has talked about how they want to go in and make it the like Riviera of the Middle East.
Yeah.
And then all the atrocious AI that came out that they put out with like the gold statues of Trump.
Oh, I'm not sure I saw
it. It was disgusting.
I will say this though. I spent some time in Israel. I've got some friends that are Israeli. I really loved my time in Israel. I love the Israelis and I love the Israeli culture. That being said, and I haven't spent any time in Palestine. Like, I'll be completely transparent. It is hard to watch when genocide is going on. I'm not saying that there's not a very long history of conflict, but I would agree with you. You know, it's a larger conversation of, like, nobody necessarily wants to jump into war, right? No. We don't. Nobody wants that. But of the things that we are going to involve ourselves in, there's some things that we are letting go on that I think violate humanity. Mm-hmm. And we have to really dig deep within ourselves to decide, like, where our moral compass lies, right? If, as Americans, our diplomacy should be based upon a moral ground of, like, listen, this is what it means to be American. These are the things that we will not tolerate throughout the world. And if we see you people doing these things elsewhere, we will go to extreme lengths to find a peaceful resolution. If you choose, after all of that, to not choose peace and force our hand, then there will be action. Mm-hmm. And our action will be morally based, not religiously based. I think that we got to be really careful when we're talking about freedom of speech and freedom of religious expression and all these types of things. And it can't just have a white face. I guess that's my larger point.
Yeah. I agree. It can't just... We can't just save the white Christians.
Yeah.
The white victim complex really is a thing. White fragility is a thing. A white woman tears are such a weapon that people are utilizing, and they utilize it to harm the most marginalized of us already. And it's just become such a societal norm that it's dangerous.
Yeah. Well, you know, the U.S. has always had a complicated history with things of color. Let's just put this out there, right? And I'll be clear, I'm not picking on white people, but I do think that there is an obligation when you look a certain way that people that identify with you or are trying to serve your group that villainizes someone else and then puts a different face on it. Try and think about it in a different way. Like, not all black people are bad. Not all brown people are bad. Not all immigrants are rapists and murderers and criminals. Actually, if it wasn't for them, we probably wouldn't have had the stuff we have. Not to mention that, I have to fact check this, but the Louisiana Purchase was a huge land grab. And who owned that land prior to us? France. There's also a section that is south that was owned by Mexico.
Mm-hmm. Mexico owned a good chunk of the southwest part of the United States.
Yeah, there's a good chunk that wasn't even incorporated into the U.S. and I think it was like 1912. I mean, if we're going to start to have these types of conversations, we need to know our history. And if we don't know our history, we're damned to repeat it.
We need to know the accurate history, though, because I know that I got taught a very American-centric, American hero, savior-centric version of history. That it wasn't until I went abroad that I learned differently.
Sure.
My junior year I spent in Japan. I was a second-year student in their high school, which meant I got to go to Okinawa.
Okay.
Which, for those of you who don't know, has one of the world's largest memorial sites for World War II. And it has the names of every single soldier and person who died from every single country
It's impressive.
in the world, in this memorial. It's absolutely, like, breathtaking of, like, how much care and detail they put into this. There's a second memorial that every class goes to, and you bring a chandelier made of 1,000 paper cranes. Every single class from, like, that school will do it. So my school had 7. We made 7,000 paper cranes.
Wow.
It's a memorial to all of the young women who were in school, who were forced to become wartime nurses, who died or who were severely injured. And they specifically pointed out a group of women in Okinawa who, when the American soldiers made land and started coming at them, they were trapped in a cave with their patients. And the American soldiers started, like, bearing down, and they had to euthanize all of their patients that could not leave as young women. I mean, like 13, 14, 15-year-olds, and then make a run for it out of the cave to try and escape. And they have quotes from these girls on the walls translated into multiple languages. And some of the quotes were, "I hope to one day see the sun rise without the fear of a bullet hitting me," or "I just want to see my mom and tell her I love her again." I was never taught that is something that we did regularly or at all during World War II, was go after the infirmaries and the people helping others and the nurses and the ones taking people off the battlefield. We're taught explicitly that, America's the hero. We do the good things. We are good. We don't do anything like that. We have a statue memorializing men lifting up a flag on Okinawa having, like, defeated the battle. They defeated children. They killed children to do that. We're not taught that. But that's not what they're memorializing. No one here would know that, though, if they don't go outside and, like, learn outside of what the very strict whitewashed American washed version of history we learn is.
Well, I mean, let's speak about whitewashed. I mean, one of the men that was actually raising that flag was, I think, Navajo Nation. So, wars are complicated. And I think we need people in places that make decisions like this that are very educated and have a knowledge base. I mean, I am not a military professional. I feel I have a pretty decent amount of patriotism. I don't think that I should be put in a position where I am the one hitting the red button. Like, we need people in there that they have devoted their entire lives so they understand well the risk. That maybe we, as citizens, don't know these stories, but I would almost bet they do or know some equivalent. We did horrible things in the States. We had
concentration camps.
Exactly. Like, we took Japanese citizens. They were in concentration camps.
We didn't. We did. We had concentration camps, especially over on the western side of the country. We imprisoned Japanese people as well as anyone they thought was Japanese, because God forbid we think that people of different ethnicities actually look different in America. Everyone's the same. You're one or the other.
And a lot of people don't realize, too, that the Japanese community was a big producer of citrus fruits. So, a lot of these Japanese were farmers on the West Coast, and they confiscated their lands, and a lot of them didn't get that land back. So a lot of the citrus fruits that you may be getting from California, from those farms, like I said, not hating on the farmers. This is just part of the history. And I think that it's important to tell it. We have to talk about these type of things. That's why I'm taking the time to talk about the indigenous communities, what we're talking about the Japanese. I mean, it's not all happy history, but it's important to know, because if you don't teach your children these type of things, it's dangerous.
And that's what's being banned from being taught in schools. Right. This would be considered critical race theory.
Oh, we're probably going to get hung for this. Like, I very well know how I'm aware, put it this way. I am aware that what I am doing is dangerous. I am fully aware with the uptick in neo-Nazi and all this sort of thing.
We've got lots of them in Central Ohio. Right. They like to walk by my workplace.
Oh, really?
with the gold flags.
I saw a video trying to remember
Lincoln Heights.
Heights, yeah.
Shout out to you all in Lincoln Heights that took that matter into your own hands because the police weren't doing anything.
Yeah, let them escape in their U-Haul.
Mm-hmm. Shout out to the community that was like, we're not going to tolerate this.
Yeah, good for them. Like, yeah, I was thinking about that, and I had a conversation with some of my friends, and I was like, listen, guys, maybe we were unaware of just how close to the surface, how close to the surface. Maybe we thought that racism and stuff was a little farther down. Maybe we did. I think I did. I was aware of the history, but I wasn't aware of just how close to the surface it was simmering.
I mean, I had segregated bathrooms at the playground that I went to in South Carolina growing up.
Oh, Lord.
I'm 28.
I mean, I would consider myself very much a Northerner, not hating on the Southerners, but like that was a sense of pride for me. Like I felt like, as far as I know, none of my relatives participated in any type of slavery. If somebody finds something and then they're going to call me out, hey, I would love to know because I don't want to be associated with that. But man, I know Southern Illinois has some Klan members. There's probably Klan members in Indiana. We've got a complicated history with that.
The village I grew up in Ohio had an active Klan chapter the entire time I was growing up.
Go figure. But I think the American way of doing things would be to push these people back into their caves because we can't stand for that. And so I wouldn't be surprised if someone wanted to burn a cross on my yard, but I'll tell you, I'll go to the state house and I'll get whipped for it. So I'm not going to be one of those that's going to bow out lightly. Like women, all kinds of women, all colors of women need to stand up for these girls. Like, there are going to be young girls in this country growing up that don't have the same access to the stories or the education that we did. And so I think it's really important to stand up with a moral compass as a woman. Men too. I'm not trying to make this, a feminist issue, though it probably would be considered feminist. That's fine. Like, those of us that have a moral compass, please stand up for these kids, for these future generations. Tell these stories. The storytelling is important. Like, it's not important that you only tell the good stories because the bad stories are how people learn. It's really important, and that's part of why we're here today, to talk about this massive things and how it applies to the autism, the ADHD, neurodiverse community.
Because a lot of people try to, we're already othered by being a part of the neurodiverse community. But it's a community that a lot of people tend to forget about, and right now we do have a spotlight on us. Going back to the eugenics thing, the only way to get rid of autism is to get it out of the gene pool because it is genetic, it is hereditary. If you have autism, you likely got it from your mom or your dad. So just like, autism is genetic. So that's the only way to get it out of the gene pool is to, you have to remove it. That's eugenics. So are we going to start sterilizing or preventing anyone with autism from having kids? Because that's the only way that would happen. Or you're going to push everyone into the neurodivergent closet. Everyone's going to have to go back into being like, oh no, this is just I finally started being able to drop my mask regularly about 2 years ago after joining the live reality game show community.
Oh, talk about that.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
I started to compete in LRGs, or live reality game shows. They are essentially fan-run versions of your favorite shows like Survivor, Big Brother, The Challenge, The Mole. I've done 10 shows at this point in the past year and a half. Been in a few different ones across the country. I've done a lot of Ohio ones, but I've also done ones in Indiana, Michigan, and Texas. And it was at those shows where they want authentic, they want personality, they want a true person, that I was able to start dropping my mask. I was able to bring back a lot of the personality and a lot of the parts of me that I shoved so far down inside in order to try and fit into the little box that society was putting me into as a kid, that I've just been able to rediscover about myself. And it's been great. And it is the part of me that I was masking. I was hiding this because it didn't fit. And I don't want to have to go back. I don't want to have to put that mask back on. Do I still mask regularly? Absolutely. I work a job where I have to talk to people. So not only am I a case manager, I'm also a bartender. I have to be a customer service worker. The mask goes on, the customer service voice comes out, the fake smile. That's what happens. I can't do that every single day of my life. I refuse to do that every single day of my life. And so, like, I'm not gonna be one to just kind of back down and like lay down and let them walk over and trample over all of these communities just because maybe they aren't my community right now, but my community is in line to come after. And even if I was the top of the top, if I was a cishet white man, I would still stand up and stand in front of the bulldozers coming from the communities because I knew that that's my responsibility to do it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. I was gonna say, I'm doing this for my kids and I'm willing to die for this stuff. It's important. It really is important.
It is. I spoke about how I battle with chronic illness, but so does my mom.
Take a break and we'll have a coffee.
No, you're so fine.